What are some common foods that make you wonder? Who was the first weirdo to try eating that? 1. It's always been mushrooms, for me. The process of elimination needed to find safely edible ones. Like, this one killed someone, this one peeled back the layers of reality for 8 hours, this one is okay, this one made me shit my insides out for 3 days, etc. 2. And this one looks remarkably like the one that killed someone, but rest assured we tried this one and it is safe. 3. You wanna eat those ones over there? What's wrong with you, Harry? Do you not see all the dead people lying in that pile in front of him? Why do you think they're there? 4. I like that your hypothetical ancient person is named Harry. 5. Only name I could think of. 6. Most things like that are the result of people just watching animals eat them. Probably was pretty nuts for the people in Greenland who watched the reindeer eating the muscarada. 7. I think this has some truth to it. I also think humans were eating lots of different wild foods, like mushrooms, before we were even the human species. It's not like we started out as fully evolved humans without any experience around what is and isn't safe to eat. Animals, which we are, know what's good in their local, familiar ecosystem. If they encounter something new, they probably try it cautiously, sniff it, lick it, see how it tastes, and if it isn't awful, eat some. If it's poisonous, the effects will be soon enough to have a good idea as to what caused them. If it's a good source of nutrition, it gets added to the menu. Repeat this process indefinitely, over millennia, and you've got a totally different species eating stuff they just knew to eat because that's what they've always eaten. There is no singular origin. 8. You know, this is something I guess I knew but didn't put together in my brain like that, and it's a great point. Humans didn't pop out new like Athena from Zeus's skull. 9. Don't summon the creationists, this is exactly what they think. 10. There are ways to mitigate the dangers. Most likely people used some form of this when trying new foods, even if it was just by minimizing how much they ate at first. And then there's also always that one guy in the group who screams YOLO and eats a lot all at once. His experiences can be very informative too. 11. How were those? I met God and he turned me into a sundial for 3,000 years, then I got fucked by a squirrel. Hesitantly writes, recreational, on the mushroom page. 12. The fact that, rape by machine elves, is a suggested Google search really makes me feel like, recreational, is perhaps not quite there. Tef, that's actually a DMT thing, but the point stands. 13. I remember the scene in the book Clan of the Cave Bear where Ayla's mom found a new plant while migrating. The steps she took to evaluate its toxicity edibility. 14. Yep. Isa described the test she and the other women did for potential food plants, something about a small bite, waiting to notice any side effects, larger bite, etc. And Isa had mentioned she was more interested when there was a side effect because it indicated potential medical use. 15. My grandfather lived through famine in Europe as a child, and he remembers his family watching the neighbors harvest mushrooms. If they saw the neighbors the next day, they would go pick the same mushrooms for themselves. Some neighbors they didn't see again after seeing them eat mushrooms, so they avoided those mushrooms. 16. A little different, but my grandmother grew up piss dirt poor in the South, and one foraged thing they would eat were poke greens, which if you don't prepare right will make you shit your frontal lobe out. She told me about them growing up and how they would prepare them. One time I did food not bombs and someone brought poke greens and I watched a friend from up north munch on some before I could intervene. Frontal lobes were shat out that day. Community knowledge. 17. I'm from the South as well, and had dirt poor grandparents. Are you talking about turnip greens or collard greens? I grew up eating collard greens. So good, as you said, if cooked right. 18. Pokeweed, the plant where the berries stain everything purple. The greens are edible, but you need to boil them in multiple changes of water for an absurd amount of time. It's basically something you can eat if there is literally nothing else at all. 19. My son is into foraging. I put a lot of faith in his ability to know what is safe to eat. So far he's batting 1,000. 20. There's a Chinese idiom that translates to the first person to eat crab, meaning a very brave person. So I like to think about the person who saw a skittering water spider looking thing and went, "That looks great, I'm gonna eat it." 21. Cambodians now eat deep-fried tarantulas. They were forced into trying them during the horrific reign of Pol Pot to avoid starvation. Apparently they taste similar to soft-shelled crab. 22. I've eaten deep-fried tarantula in Cambodia. I got one of the leg hairs caught in my throat. There's nothing quite like choking on tarantula pubes. I was just thinking about this while eating crab for dinner last night. Who was the first person, after seeing a crab, said, "I'm going to crack this hard rough shell and eat the inside"? 23. I mean, plenty of animals do it, right? Birds in particular, bashing clams and crabs on rocks to break them open. Mammal bones, too, break 'em open and eat the marrow. I'm more confused about the first person to open an oyster and say, "Yup, that little dangly bit that looks like what comes out of my nose when I'm sick, definitely eating that." 24. Some other primates near the shore eat bivalves. Our lineage has been eating things like oysters since long before H. sapiens evolved. With most of these things it's not an issue of someone consciously thinking, "Hey, I'm going to eat that." It's just something that was already being done long before. 25. Even 2,000 years ago, Muslims and Jews wrote very strict laws saying, "This shit is gross and you shouldn't eat it, unless you've been starving and there is literally no other choice." Even then, you should still beg God to forgive you for eating it. Shellfish had about the same connotation as eating flies, roaches and centipedes. 26. I think it's the same reason pork was forbidden, that it can spoil quick and when it does things get nasty. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty a lot of religious dietary restrictions have roots in food safety practices. 27. The foodborne illnesses pork is known for aren't unique to pigs. One thing that's different about pigs is, relatively speaking, it takes a lot of water to raise them. Cultures that eat pork tend to originate from wet climates, and cultures that have taboos against pork tend to originate dry climates. 28. That's an interesting point. Seems like a lot of forbidden foods and resting your fields for a year, or seasons, come from best farming ranching practices to protect the soil and environment or just general health concerns with certain foods and the ability to keep them safe to consume. 29. It was mostly because pigs tend to eat and roll around in their own shit and people thought you'd get sick if you prepared or ate them. Modern technology and farming has made this a little bit less of an issue, but many people still choose to avoid pork today, even if they don't follow a religion that tells them to avoid it. 30. My dad raised free-range pigs 40 plus years ago. He tells me they used to go to the farthest corner to shit and never shit in their houses or food areas. I guess when they're factory farmed or in close quarters they have no choice. 31. Adam Ragusa did a bit on the history of pigs. They didn't generally wallow naturally, but they also don't sweat. They're livestock animals, though, and they go where the people go. So people took them out of their nice, cool, natural habitat and into the Middle East, where there's a ton of heat and no means for them to sweat. So they wallow to cool down? Gross. Behavior that we encouraged by moving them to unnaturally hot climates for them. 32. Cheese. It's a good thing they figured it out, too. 33. Came here to say the same thing. My granny used to make cheese, and once she explained what rennet was, I wondered what kind of fatted calf sacrifice her ancestors got up to. 34. The theory I've heard, and Wikipedia mentions, is that we used animal stomachs as containers for milk. The stomachs would have some rennet in them, which would lead to the first step of making cheese. It's really fascinating. Cheese was probably an accident. 35. That's definitely the common story, but something quite important it misses out is that rennet is not essential for cheesemaking. Animal rennet even less so. You can curdle milk by simply heating and cooling it in the right way, or by adding an acid to it. Many softer cheeses are not made with rennet at all and never have been. Examples of this in the present day include mozzarella, paneer, ricotta, most cottage cheese, cream cheese, etc. So it's very likely cheesemaking in general was a thing long before the use of rennet, and it represented an improvement or new style to an already existing foodstuff. Also, there are quite common plants which contain rennet too. They aren't as concentrated as animal rennet and they aren't good for long-aged cheese. They generally turn bitter if aged too long. But it's entirely possible that firm, but not aged, cheeses also predate the discovery of animal rennet. So there's another possible version of this story where rather than this happening and cheese being invented whole cloth as a result, it happened to people who already had cheeses and they just noticed that when young animals' stomachs were involved it made the cheese particularly firm. All speculation, of course, because we don't really know how it happened exactly, only that it had happened by a certain point. 36. It makes you appreciate how India, despite being one of the largest dairying countries in the world with many milk-based recipes, has very little diversity in their cheeses, especially compared to Europe. Culture is a huge filter for technology. 37. Absolutely. Someone was really hungry. Oh, I guess I'll eat this nasty rotted goo that oozed out of this stinky mammal's teat. By the way, I love cheese. 38. Butter. Hey, I'm gonna take this milk and churn the ever-loving shit out of it until something happens. 39. Irk Alton Brown did a thing on this. Some dudes riding a camel put the milk in an animal organ pouch, old school canteen I guess. And when they went to drink it, it was all curdled and gross. Apparently only gross to drink, so they're like this would be rad on some bread or baked potatoes. I'm paraphrasing a bit. 40. Omar, the milk's gone weird. Damn it, Abdul, that was our last milk. We're gonna have to have it anyway. Huh. The liquid is gross but the solid bits taste kinda good. It'd be rad on some bread or baked potatoes. Omar, what the fuck is a potato? 41. Coffee. Who was like, okay, this is gross as is, but if I roast it and put it in hot water it's actually kinda good. 42. IRC. It was discovered by Arab Ethiopian goats in the 9th century, according to anecdotal legend anyway. The goatherd noticed the stimulant effects on his goats. 43. Expanding on this, civet coffee. Literally coffee beans pooped out by an animal after eating them. Like. Why? 44. I tried it when I was in Indonesia and they said that apparently it was discovered popularized among locals while they were colonized by the Dutch. The Dutch controlled the tea and coffee plantations, and locals harvesting the coffee weren't allowed to have any of the coffee beans, but the coffee beans on the ground that were already digested by civets were ignored as waste by the plantations, so the locals took those and cleaned them. 45. That's a really cool fact. My aquatic science teacher tried some while over in Asia, not sure which country, at a night market and said it was the best coffee she'd had. But I still don't have the guts to try civet coffee. 46. Probably the smell it has. Coffee bean smell is addicting. 47. Chocolate. There is no way that someone could guess that the goop inside a cocoa bean pod could be made into anything edible. 48. People get hungry, they'll eat anything. The cacao bean. Igno, when you buy Baker's dark chocolate it tells you what % cacao the chocolate is? Cacao is 100% cacao, who knew? I eat Baker's chocolate anything under 48% or it's too bitter, and I like bitter. So people just like bitter chocolate beans. 49. What's really crazy is the bean has to ferment first, which means they were trying even grosser cacao pods, rotten ones, to finally get to a chocolate byproduct. 50. That Italian cheese with live maggots inside it. 51. They were probably so hungry they would have eaten anything. 52. This is the one food I think that must have been a starvation response, cause BRUH. 53. I always wonder about processed foods, like bread. Who was the first person to complete all those steps to get bread? 54. Or toast. Let's bake it again. 55. My theory on toast, especially at breakfast, is to use up yesterday's stale bread. No plastic to keep it fresh. 56. Artichoke. Someone actually took a bite of a bitter, raw artichoke and said, "Man, this tastes like shit. Let's cook it and taste it again." 57. But only eat the middle part and then scrape the undersides of the leaves with your teeth for the rest. 58. Oysters. Big pile of snot in a shell. 59. Definitely. First people to eat oysters were starving. 60. Especially raw. 61. Any filtering shellfish for that matter. Scallops and mussels too. Edit, I meant mussels. I get to ring in New Year's with a fever. Yay fever brain. 62. Baboons eat them, so probably we've been eating them since before we were human. 63. Same definition for cow's eggs honestly. 64. Lobster. 65. Lobster used to be given to the poor and slaves because it was considered to be a foul meal. It wasn't until way later that people realized how good lobster actually is. 66. They were just ground up whole and fed to them as is. They didn't boil them and serve with butter. My vote goes to durian. 67. Who's the genius that said, "Hey, this starchy thing in the ground sure looks like it'll be really tasty after I boil the crap out of it"? When it came to the potato? I know it comes from South America, but I want to know who that guy or girl was and how they came up with this. Also, I would want to blow their mind by saying, instead of just boiling it, cut it into really thin discs and fry it in oil. It gets crunchy and extra yummy. 68. Probably from watching other animals. Wild potatoes contain a toxin that will kill humans and at least some other animals. That toxin is neutralized by a compound contained in dirt. So when the animals eat the potatoes, they also ingest dirt, making them safe to eat. People in South America who still eat wild potatoes continue to eat a bit of dirt with them to make it safe. I believe I originally read this in the book 1491, but did quickly Google to confirm. 69. Legend has it that an unruly customer at a restaurant kept asking for his potatoes to be thinner and thinner. Angry, the chef finally placed the thinnest possible slices in a pan and voila, Chips Crisps were born. Disclaimer, I read this in an 80s question and answer book which is likely outdated or plain wrong after some years. Take my story with a heaping helping of salt. 70. Orangutans eat durian, so hungry people probably gave it a shot after seeing orangutans enjoying it. I'm sure other rainforest animals eat it, too. 71. I can't imagine smelling it, then thinking, that must be food. 72. Nuke MAM, let's take the smelly sauce from rotting fish and use it on our meal. Probably started as a prank or an assassination attempt. 73. The weirder thing is that fermented fish sauces are pretty common and found all over the place. A lot of people decided to leave fish to rot for months and then cook with the salty, smelly liquid. 74. Not a common food, but a native one, the kernel of the Caraka berry. It has to be cooked in a hangi for 24 hours or boiled, continuously boiled, for 6 to 8 hours before they are edible. If not properly prepared, they are highly poisonous. 75. That's up there with fugu. Only a small portion of the fish is actually safe to eat, but an untrained chef or an unclean blade can end up poisoning someone. And the best part is that there is no cure. 76. Geoduck. Looks like penis on the half shell. Real damn difficult to harvest yank out of wet sand. 77. My favorite. Dirty Jobs. Episode is the one where he harvests geoducks in Puget Sound. 78. Ballut. As a kid, seeing relatives nonchalantly eat balut can really scar you lol. 79. Just Googled it. Dionty. 80. I learned about that dish in high school from a Malaysian friend who was going to visit relatives there in the summer. We were discussing street food and he mentioned Ballut offhandedly and I was like, what's that basil? And he just fucking broke my brain about it. I mean, I'm not one to judge other cultures' cuisine willy-nilly. Because what the hell do I know? But this was the one that broke me. 81. Who decided that if they mixed a ton of random things plus flour, sugar, and eggs and baked it they would get something delicious? 82. Well, we knew what flour was, we made it. Sugar is an add-on. Isn't cookie dough just flour, butter, and pasteurized eggs? We churned the butter, made the flour. We knew flour rose BC we had bread. One day someone wanted to make eggs with their bread in the oven and it got mashed. And got cake, I guess. 83. Shortbread is just flour, sugar, and butter. Bread is just flour and water, fermented, and baked with more flour and water. 84. That's what the sauce is. I never would have guessed. 85. Shout out to all the people in prehistory who ate random shit. We gotta show people more love who do crap like planking and eating bugs on a dare. It's totally the same genes. 86. Only except for survival purposes, now it is for the internet likes. 87. Olives. Taste horrible until salted, cured, etc. 88. IMO, then they still taste terrible, but my husband disagrees and eats mine happily. 89. I love olives, but how on earth someone worked that out is beyond me. 90. The story I've heard is that olives were found washed up on the shore, which were essentially cured by the seawater. 91. Foods that are toxic before properly cooked or otherwise processed. Like red kidney beans, raw, will kill you, and it only takes a few. Imagine how hungry you would have to be to say, well, Joe ate a handful of those yesterday and now he's dead, let's try cooking them, I guess. 92. I'd wager a lot of this kinda thing came from intertribal communal communication. Some would have just tried cooking, others would have tried raw, and then maybe the Robian tribe discovered the Cookidbian tribe is eating them, and are still alive and without indigestion hours later. I'd imagine you spend the night, poke around in the AM just to be sure. Then report back with victorious news that will get you all the bush women. 93. Eggs for sure. 94. This is always my first answer to this question. And who decided they should be cooked? Who decided the shell shouldn't be eaten? Forever a mystery. 95. Cottage cheese. Who was the first person to look at a bucket of curdled milk and holler, "Ma, get a spoon. I can't even with cottage cheese." Ike. 96. I love cottage cheese, but this totally makes sense lol. It doesn't exactly look appetizing mayo. 97. Honey. It's delicious, but who thought, let me try this be vomit? 98. Bears and other animals eat it, also it comes from pollen which is sweet, so is not a very crazy idea. 99. Yeah, honey smells and looks appealing. I think after seeing how bears will go for it even when they get stung for the effort, I would assume it must be worth trying. 100. Milk. Like what human missed nursing so much that they decided to get it from another animal. Lol. Also pufferfish. 101. Pufferfish is the correct answer. The Japanese eat 22 species, each one has some part of it that could kill you in less than a minute. The poisonous part is different for each species. How did they find that out?